Hello everybody, it's time for VEDA17. Why? Well, why not? It's April 16th, 2012, and it's about just a little after, well, it's 3:45 in the morning, and it's time for Comments X. This Comments X is going to be dedicated to Cassandra at NerdsRL because she was feeling kind of, let's say, regretful about some of the choices she's made in her life. That doesn't mean she necessarily made bad choices. It's not talking about that. It's sometimes when you choose a particular path in life, the complications that will pop up in your chosen career, your chosen field, when you are really tired and you've been working late nights, and if you've watched her videos, she's been working very late nights, and she actually has a hard time sleeping during, getting to sleep early enough, and that was sort of one of her goals. A fatigue thing sets in, which kind of makes you a little depressed, and makes you think about the choices you made in terms of why you actually went down the path you did and made the life choices you made, and wondering if you should really be there. And I think the easiest way to sort of explain it is to say that she's not alone in this. This is not, you could say to somebody, oh, don't worry about it, it's going to get better. But a lot of times you don't know that that it is going to get better, and sometimes it could actually get worse at certain point in times, because there are going to be trials and tribulations that come up. And so the best way to go about sort of dealing with this is seeing if other people have gone through the same thing. And I could say I've done the exact same thing, so I'm going to dedicate this whole section to her and sort of briefly describe how I came about. And it was, again, one of those unusual choices. I didn't want to do the standard thing out of high school that everyone else was doing, so I wound up going into astrophysics, and just into my second year of astrophysics, and this was more than 20 years ago. So she was a baby at the time, or just about being born, or a baby at the time. The university that I was at started, well, there were a variety of causes. One of the causes was they were getting their budgets cut. There was a round of massive budget cuts where a lot of scientific programs were being cut, and one of the major programs that were being cut was the astronomy and physics department. Even though the astronomy and physics department, where they had some top-notch programs there, the axe fell pretty heavily, and there was sort of a pessimism going around and saying, well, if you're going to go become a scientist, everyone has to go to the States, and otherwise you're not going to be able to pursue a career in science here in Canada. This was kind of the attitude of the scientists and the different professors, and they called everyone into the office and sort of talked to people about what they wanted to do with their careers and stuff like that. And my decision was, because ironically enough, I'm an American. I was born in Boston to parents of Greek and Middle Eastern descent, and the attitude of an American, and this is what I could view as the American attitude, this was the view that I had back then of the American view, was that if the government wasn't going to do something for you, got up and did it for yourself. And so my decision was, well, why not set up my own research institute? And the thing is that no one at that point in time, in the second year of university, had ever thought of doing that like that. And when I went and approached several professors about the idea, they all thought I was nuts and crazy. But the thing is that I wasn't deterred from this. A lot of times, if I set my mind to doing something, I get up and I do it. So I got I got close about like I think close to $300 or something like that for my birthday. So around birthday, I spent all my money, all my birthday money, on incorporating my research company, Delta R&D Inc. I bought a tiny, my first corporate phone, and installed a telephone line in my bedroom and in the corner of my bedroom that I had set up as my office, and where my library, my first library had been. Delta R&D Inc., my research institute, was born, and that began my career. And the thing is that the area that I had been studying was quantum physics, and one of the areas that sort of particularly interested me was the random walk. And the random walk is a very bizarre type of scientific method, where there's no purpose and there's no conclusion. Because in quantum physics you can't predict things, things remain random. You can only understand things and set your goals to a degree of probability, and there'd be no certainty or no absolute in that. So there was no, for me, there was no purpose to have a purpose, which was your classical scientific method was you did an experiment to predict whether or not your theory was correct or not, you sort of prove your model. But from my understanding of quantum physics, this wasn't how quantum physics worked. And when I started looking into what other researchers into the sort of the history of what was going on in physics, this was when I began my research institute. I started looking elsewhere beyond the actual textbooks into what was around in the physics environment in terms of what was. And this was pre-internet, so there wasn't the internet around. I actually had to go out to bookstores. I had to go, I had to go out to the library. There's a lot of sort of traveling around. It was kind of interesting because I was looking for something, but I didn't know exactly what I was looking for. And this is what sort of popped up a problem. The people say, "Oh, you got a business now." And a lot of my Greek relatives saw that I moved into this business. They would say, "Oh, yeah, you're moving into a business now. Great. You have to go to the bank and get a loan, right? Everyone goes, when you set up a business, you go to the bank and get a line of credit or a loan." So I said, "Okay, let's go to the bank and open a bank account and get a line of credit." So went into the bank, met the bank manager, or one of the account managers, set up an account, and they asked, "Okay, what does Delta R&D Inc. do?" I just froze. How do you explain to somebody that your entire company is based on an idea surrounding quantum physics and the random walk? No company has ever been set up on that basis. I mean, so I tried to explain to them a little bit. I went into a little bit about the fundamentals of calculus, the concept of a limit, and asymptotic limits. Basically, kind of finished, just sort of, not really finished, it was took a pause to see what this look on their face, and basically it was like a blank vacant look, like, what the heck? What the hell is going on here? But that was my beginning was like that, and until I really got I got into my PhD level. A large chunk of what I did, most people had no idea what I was doing. And I tried to explain it to them, and they saw me working with, still studying from textbooks. I was still hanging out with kids, because they're the only ones really who were studying at all in the church at all. So I hang around. I do homework with all the kids who were doing homework, because a lot of times they'd bring their homework to church, and they'd just hang out in the church. I mean, the parents of that generation, schoolwork was kind of secondary, and they dragged their kids around everywhere with them. So if they went to church, or they were working at a restaurant, the kids went along with them, and wherever they went, the school books went, and they just sort of sat around and did homework while their parents worked, or were at church or whatever. And that's sort of how I started hanging out with the younger crowd, and I started watching when I was studying calculus. I started watching Sailor Moon while I was doing my calculus, and that's how I started off with the anime and the path I'm on now for the type of anime that I like. But no one understood what I was doing, and there was really no way to explain to people what I was doing. And and the thing is when you're doing something like that, despite the excitement, there's also the understanding of risk. And sometimes you could ignore the risk that you're taking with your life in terms of where you're going to end up going with your life. And sometimes, particularly when you're tired and you've been doing a lot of studying, you've worked up late nights, the fatigue you end up feeling kind of forces you to look back and sort of make an assessment of your life in a way that you end up, how did I end up getting here? And you kind of regret taking the path you take. And I guess the older you get in this, and you go down this path, particularly if you don't end up making $1 million right away, because most people are like, oh, you're going to get in the, that you assume you're going to end up hitting a gold mine and not simply be chasing something around for a couple of decades. Then sort of questions start to pop up. There were several suggestions, not only from myself, when I was tired, but you get comments, suggestions. Well, maybe Daniel, you should go see someone professionally to sort of work these things out with. It doesn't really seem like you know where you're going. But the thing is that yeah, I didn't know where I was going, but that was actually part of the quantum physics random walk. Well, the whole purpose of the random walk is to literally take that random walk, and that's why there's no purpose and there's no conclusion. Is the random walk doesn't have that, because you can't predict things. Things are all probabilistic. They sit within a realm between randomness and some degree of certainty. Not and this is what I'm saying. Not certainty. Some degree of certainty. In other words, you will never gain a full understanding of what you're studying. Everything continuously moves off. And what I had done during that period, and started doing that period, because there are just times where there was really nothing to do. I really couldn't figure out where I was supposed to go next. And my library, I kept going out and buying new books and going around different bookstores and reading different things. And I started taping the shows on PBS, the various different documentaries, sort of figure out what they were doing on there. Just sort of trying to figure out where I was going to go next. So I was just at that point in time, building my library, and that's all I was doing at the end. In the first 6 years was really basically building my library and reading. And so when you're building a library and reading, there really isn't a lot of what you call your time that you have is really kind of scattered, and to pay for everything, what I did is I did freelance work. I did freelance IT work. I did consulting work. I ended up helping my brother get into computers. I set up a business for my dad and my brother, doing computer training and a whole variety of odd different jobs that sort of paid the bills and everything like that. And that's all it was. The jobs weren't anything specific. They were just simply there to pay the bills. And so I had a fair amount of free time on my hand, and I started doing puzzles. Expanded my library expanded from my room, gotten too large for my room, and things started spilling over into the basement. And so I started fixing up the basement as my second office, where I go down. I'd be down there around 3, 4, 5, 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'd be working on puzzles that have you know, an oldies radio station on or something like that, and I'd be sitting there doing puzzles. Started off with 300-400 piece puzzles, but quickly found they got too easy, and then moved up to I saw these puzzles that were 1,500 piece puzzles. These presented a huge challenge. So, but the thing is, where you could easily find the edges, you work from the edges, and you start working on the different clumps, and then there were some areas that you really couldn't do, but they were so alike that you really couldn't match them up. So you started having to develop an algorithm. You had to develop an algorithm, a sorting algorithm, to figure out how you were going to start fitting these pieces together. And so I started writing my algorithms down because I was still studying computer science at the time, and developed an algorithm for doing puzzles. And I didn't really understand how these things would impact me or benefit me later on. These were just sort of things I was doing, sort of randomly walking around picking stuff up as per the random walk. But there were nights, there were times when you just literally felt that everything was passing you by. You weren't the greatest scientist out there. You weren't Einstein. You weren't. There were people who were, easily much better than I was in physics. There still is. There were easily people who were much better than I was in IT and in computer science, and you wound up feeling like, why the heck am I doing this? But a lot of it, I realized, was simply fatigue. It was simply the point in times where I was feeling tired, and as long as I got a good night's sleep afterwards, or it was not really a night's sleep, but a day sleep, then things would be fine afterwards. And the thing is, I had to do things to sort of change my day up. I had to go take a walk, and that's when I started just simply strolling around. And my walks were actually not short strolls. I've literally walked all over Toronto. I've gone out for hours at a time. The longest walk I've ever taken was essentially about 10-12 hours at a time. I had done that, and I've walked basically from downtown Toronto to the outskirts of my neighborhood. If you want to look up where it was at the time, there's a mall in Toronto right off the 401 and Don Valley called Fairview Mall. I walked all the way from Toronto Island. There's islands that go down. There's Central Island. I walked from Toronto Islands. I went on the ferries there to the island. Came back and then decided, let's walk up Yonge Street and see what's on Yonge Street, up the entire length of Yonge Street. And this is what happens in my life. A lot of stuff isn't planned. It just I get a question popped on, what if I did this, and I follow down that path to see kind of what happens. And it says, 20 years on, things are going well. I've got my own place. I've got my own unit here. I'm living in my libraries now. My libraries are quite large now. I'm doing a lot of work with my dad. We ended up selling more than 10 years ago. We ended up selling the computer business. My brother got tired of actually being in business, and realized that when you have your own business and you're doing contracting work, it's not 9 to 5. It's 24/7, because you always have to become looking around and thinking about where you're going to getting your next income from, because no one's there to give you that standard paycheck from 9 to 5. And so my brother went out into the work world and went back to work in IT, but he was still really shaky at the time in terms of his confidence in IT. And so what he used to do is he used to, whenever a customer called him, he'd put the customer on hold and say he'd have to talk to a senior manager to, his back support. And so he'd put them on hold, and he'd call me, and I'd be his back support. And I supported him for a couple of years like that, but now he's more or less on his own. And my dad went back to primarily, he was always a priest, but now he went back to primarily being a priest and primarily doing his theological work, and I had come up to the point where I had done enough of my research to the point, and my writing was to the point where I could now write and work with him. So things, even though they take a long time to develop, and you never, I haven't made millions of dollars and stuff like that, but that was never the point. The point was to follow what I wanted to do in life, to follow my dreams. And while at several points in time in life, you are going to feel tired, you're going to feel exhausted, and while you're feeling tired and exhausted, this is where you're going to start feeling fatigue, and you're going to start feeling really depressed about the choices you've made. And the thing is that if this is what you want, and this is the sort of the feel you want, you got to understand that this is going to be normal, that this is going to occur at some point in time, and there are going to be rough scrapes. This is the risk of being your own boss. Being your own boss and sort of going your own direction. That's where it is. And I said, well, I keep watching your show, Cassandra. This is for you, Cassandra. I keep watching your show, and if I see you getting in any trouble or you really start feeling down, I'll put out some more. But I'll give you some more suggestions if you want about where you can go. I've been down your road. I've been doing this now for 20 years. As I said, and this is what I'm saying is that I'm not going to tell you that things are going to get better, because it doesn't matter how much better things get in terms of what you end up doing. As long as you're pushing yourself, and this is what happens when you're out on your own like this, and you're pushing stuff, you're trying to achieve these goals, there are always going to be days when you're so tired you're going to feel really bad, and that's never going to go away. That's never going to change. You just simply have to realize that there are going to be days like this, in that these days are short, and at some point in time they will go away, and you'll be back to sort of working again. We're just going to focus, and this is the hard part. The times when you're not feeling bad is when you're focusing on your work. The bad times usually come, ironically, when you have enough chance to, it's after you relax, and this is what I'm watching here now. I've watched you do this. Your issues with the choices that you made, your fatigue, come once you've relaxed enough, and you start thinking. You have a chance to start thinking about the things you've done. While you're at work and going through all that exhaustion and actually having to go through work, you're so focused on the work and the adrenaline you need to push yourself through it. You're not thinking about the fatigue and tiredness. That comes later on after you're relaxing. So this is something that you got to realize, that every time you relax, every time you sort of take time off, that these feelings are going to hit every single time. And as long as you understand that these are normal feelings, and that people who are in this type of field get this way, then you'll be all right, and you can continue moving forward. And the thing is, just because you switch fields and do something more normal doesn't necessarily mean these feelings are going to go away either. There are other stresses and other risks in any field that you choose, whether you like the field or not. Anyways, I thought I'd leave you with that. I hope this helps. Have a great day, and I'll see you and everybody else on YouTube for VEDA17 tomorrow.